Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the venue for venues. Tonight, we have a very special guest with us, somebody who's been on the blues scene, the Chicago blues scene, for 35 years. He recently celebrated his 12th release on Delmark Records. He has a critically acclaimed podcast. He is a partner at Space, and he's our good friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Spector.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here. So I guess we'll play a couple tunes.
Sounds good.
When tough times fall upon you and fill your life with doubt, on a treadmill of confusion, makes you want to scream and shout, living in a trick bag of trouble, wondering what it's really about. You just pay your dues, play these blues from the inside out. Now maybe nothing's gonna make you happy, and there's a weight that's bringing you down. Maybe you lost all your hard-earned money, and your Pontiac done broke down. Well, you don't have to take it or drink moonshine until you pass out. You just pay your dues, play these blues from the inside out. From the inside out. Now when that tax man keeps a calling and your life's stuck in low gear, and you're all alone in some two-bit town playing for cheap cigarettes and watered-down beer. Just listen to the blues man's story. He'll tell you what it's really about. You just pay your dues, play these blues from the inside out. When times of trouble fall upon you, can't find a friend in sight, leave that darkness far behind you. Let the blues be your shining light. I've learned a lot from those before me who've taught me what it's really about. Just pay your dues, play these blues from the inside out. From the inside out. From the inside out. Scott, good to play with you.
Likewise, man.
First time.
Yeah, man. I've been seeing you play since the 90s. So this is a thrill for me, man.
All right. Well,
what do you want to do?
I think we should do On Your Way Down, which is a tune I just started doing.
Yeah.
And like most people, the first version I heard was by Little Feat on the Waiting for Columbus record. But then I started getting into New Orleans music and Alan Toussaint specifically. And it's a song that he wrote, and he's one of the best songwriters we've ever had in this country, in my opinion.
Agreed. Completely agree.
And although it doesn't have a blues structure, the lyrics are about as bluesy and low down as you can get.
Also agree. Good?
And I think you got a pretty intro you're going to play on this one.
We'll see.
Sunrise and sunset, since the beginning it hasn't changed yet. Some people fly high, begin to lose sight. can't see very clearly when you're in flight. Well, it's high time that you found the same people you misuse on your way up. You might meet up on your way down. Vintage wines from the year 62. It's your thing, it's your thing, it's your thing, it's what pleases you. You got to frown when you cross town. You think it's an honor, girl, just to have you around. Well, it's high time that you found the same dudes you misuse on your way up. You might meet up on your way down. You think the sun rises and sets for you. But the same sunrise sets and shines on the poor folks too. I don't mind you turning around. I myself might even like to find a little higher ground. Well, it's high time that you found the same people you misuse on your way up. You might meet up on your way down. Here we go.
Dave Spector, y'all.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, all right. That felt good. We're gonna do a little bit more of that in a while. And before we get to talk to Dave a little bit about what he does, who he is, and his work in many facets of the music industry, we should point out that tonight your donations are going to a really special cause, and I'd like Dave to talk a little bit about that for us.
Yes, if you'd be so kind and can find a little change in your pockets or a nice donation, we would be honored to donate it to the COVID-19 Blues Musician Emergency Relief Foundation that has been, the Emergency Relief Fund that has been set up by the Blues Foundation down in Memphis. The Blues Foundation does the National Blues Hall of Fame. They sponsor and present the BMAs, the Blues Music Awards, and they have organized this very important fund to help musicians around the country in need. Again, it's the COVID-19 Blues Musician Emergency Relief Fund, and any donations you send in for tonight, we will pass 100% of that total on to that fund. So,
that's right. And you know, it's weird to do some of these live streams because it feels like any time I do a live stream at this point in time, your donations are helping musicians, clubs. We've got this emergency relief fund, and sometimes I think like, wow, this is kind of overwhelming, but I guess we should note that the world is overwhelming right now, and there's a lot of people that need help. So if you can support the cause, you're doing a real good thing for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, they've already helped a large number of musicians, some of whom I know. So it's a great cause.
Cool. All right. What I'd like to do first here is talk a little bit to Dave about Dave. He's played out here a bunch of times. He's got a fascinating career, multifaceted one. And I'd like to start right at the beginning and ask you, where was the first music? What first caught your ear? When did it make you think you wanted to play guitar? Were there other instruments involved? Tell us a little bit.
Well, I grew up in Chicago on the Northwest Side in a very musical family and heard music all the time. Everything from classical to folk to bluegrass to blues to rock and roll. I'm the youngest of three siblings, and my older brother and sister are musicians and kind of tail-end hippies.
Yeah.
And, you know, I grew up listening to a lot of Beatles and Stones and Doors and Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
But also Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. My older brother Howie, who I think is watching out there in California, would come home and tell me about, you know, going to see Howlin' Wolf and buying him peppermint schnapps. And, you know, there was a story, I think my brother and sister both went to see Muddy Waters on Christmas or on New Year's. He played at the Earl of Old Town, and they would go to the clubs. My brother especially had the records. And then on WFMT, which is the main classical radio station that's still going in Chicago, they would have a show on Saturday nights called the Midnight Special, which was a music variety show, not classical. And my parents listened to that every Saturday night they were home, and we didn't live in a very big house, so we heard everything they were playing. And I remember hearing Muddy Waters and Big Bill Broonzy, and that was probably even before I heard my brother's records. And I was like, it like almost moved me to tears. I was like, what is that? That's the most powerful thing I've ever heard. And as much as I love rock and roll, I never, it sounded, the rock and roll sounded like kids compared to the blues of Muddy or Big Bill.
Yeah.
So that's where I first heard it.
Okay. And when did it translate into I got to play guitar?
Later on, I was a huge music fan throughout high school, but my life revolved around basketball.
Okay.
And I picked up guitar on my way down to college in Champaign.
Okay.
So I was about 18.
Okay.
And I just grabbed, I think it was my brother's nylon string acoustic. And that was probably the first guitar I had. And then soon after that, I got a Gibson, kind of like a cheaper Les Paul, and a Telly, because Keith Richards was my first guitar hero. And, I remember how I spent hours trying to figure out the intro to Brown Sugar when I was, 18, working a graveyard shift summer job. And I remember the pride, the immense pride I felt when I finally got it down, even though I wasn't an open G. So, and learning, Keith solo on, was it Sympathy for the Devil? Yeah, on Sympathy for the Devil. Learning that solo was a big step for me. And then I started, getting Magic Sam records and Buddy Guy and Junior Wells records and Albert Collins records, and I learned how to just play along.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of my learning.
Was there any formal training, or was the formal training your ear and a turntable?
Nothing formal, no. I mean, I took very informal lessons.
Yeah.
I actually took lessons for a few weeks at the Old Town School in Evanston, I remember.
Okay.
I wish I could remember my teacher's name, but it was acoustic. And then later on, one of my favorite lesson stories is when I met Jimmy Johnson. And he's still playing great, still around at age 92. And I met him in the mid-'80s, early 80s, and I asked him for lessons, and he invited me over to his house.
Wow.
And a couple times I went over there to Harvey, where he still lives, and he just taught me and gave me some really important tips.
Yeah, that's cool. So, well, first of all, let me just say that one of the best, I was probably in the mid-'90s, there was somewhere I was seeing Jimmy Johnson play, and he came to get a glass of water or something at the bar, and I just complimented his songwriting. And I think one of the coolest things he ever said to me, or was one of the only things he ever said to me, was one of the coolest things anybody said to me, was he said, anybody could take a Muddy Waters tune and put new lyrics to it. And I think Jimmy is just an amazing songwriter.
Yeah.
Like, he really delivers really good tunes. We're gonna touch on him again in a minute. But at what point in time was this a hobby that started to become a thing? And when did you start playing in bands? And when did you realize, like, this could be my job?
I started playing in amateur bands in college when I was just learning how to play. I was immediately attracted to musicians and artists instead of the classroom, but it all worked out okay. And I decided probably by my sophomore or junior year in college that I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very good then, but I realized the place I needed to be, I wanted to be a blues musician, and the place I needed to be was back in Chicago.
Sure.
So I came back to Chicago and just dove into the blues scene, and it took some time. One of the first jobs I got was for Delmark Records, and working for Bob Kester at the record label a couple days a week, and then I'd work at the Jazz Record Mart downtown on the weekends. I was the shipping clerk when their offices and warehouse were still on Lincoln Avenue.
Okay.
And then I got a couple other odd jobs at record stores and at Blues on Halsted as their doorman.
Okay.
And that was a great gig because I could, stand inside and listen to 3 sets or 5 sets or 6 sets of blues every night.
Yeah.
And get paid for it and get to meet a lot of musicians. That was the most important thing.
Yeah. And if you go back to when you were watching the door there, off the top of your head, who was some of the people that just got you, where you were just like, that's where it's at?
A long list, but a few that stand out. Magic Slim.
Yeah.
When Magic Slim and the Teardrops had Slim and John Primer. John was the second guitar player, but he'd open the set.
Yeah.
And Slim's brother, Nick Holt, was on bass.
Okay.
Herman Applewhite was on drums when I first started seeing them. That was a killer band that I loved seeing, and I learned so much from watching the interaction between Primer and Magic Slim.
Sure.
Every Sunday night, Sunnyland Slim
Oh, wow.
with Steve Freund on guitar, who
Okay.
kind of became my mentor and big brother and kind of took me under his wing and really taught me a lot.
Okay.
And Steve still is one of my favorite players anywhere.
He's great.
He's out in California. Seeing Lonnie Brooks,
Yeah.
in his prime, starting in the 80s.
Yeah.
I got to see Otis Rush there,
Yeah.
which, seeing him in such a small club was incredible. And seeing Otis Clay there, stepping a little outside of the blues into soul music. But one of the most amazing nights I can remember at Blues on Halstead was Otis Clay played there with the high rhythm section, with Teeny Hodges and the Hodges brothers.
Yeah.
And, this club holds maybe 100 people or something.
Right. And for those who don't know, like High Records, that's Al Green. I mean, that's
Yeah.
there's so many people from High Records, Ovi Wright and stuff. So much great soul music.
Sure. Syl Johnson, Ann Peebles.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Was that like a special event? Like why were they up? That just happened.
I think they were they toured with Otis quite a bit over the years.
Okay.
So they were probably on their way out of town somewhere and maybe met in Chicago.
Okay.
Because Otis lived in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then later on I got to record and play some gigs with Otis Clay, which is one of the highlights of my life.
Sure. That you can't beat that.
Right.
Well, and that's a good point or a good time to maybe start to talk about. So you're immersing yourself in this music, the community. You're finding odd jobs that are still within the community.
Yeah.
And who were some of the first people that hired you to play? And when did you start to go on the road? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, I started getting gigs as a sideman probably in '85. Jimmy Johnson would hire me.
Cool.
Jimmy was doing piano gigs.
Whoa.
He played at Lily's on Lincoln Avenue,
Yeah.
right in the heart of Lincoln Park. They were famous for blues piano.
Okay.
You could see Blind John Davis and Jimmy Walker and Sunnyland Slim there. And Jimmy was really getting into piano then, and he'd play piano gigs and would hire me to play guitar.
Wow.
And he wouldn't even play guitar on the shows,
Wow.
It was just like a cool, funky piano bar.
Yeah.
Steve Freund hired me as his rhythm guitar player.
Okay.
I think that was the first gig I ever did was at Blues Chicago, which is still there downtown, as Steve's rhythm guitar player. And Johnny Littlejohn, Big Time Sarah.
Okay.
Those were some of the first gigs I did. And I got hooked up with Sam Lay
Yeah.
through some mutual musician friends. And Sam Lay didn't work around Chicago a lot, but he would play up in Canada quite a bit. There was quite a bit of work in Canada in these joints that were strip clubs during the day and blues clubs at night.
Okay.
From Winnipeg to Calgary to Saskatoon and London, Ontario, and and they book you for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So Sam Lay hired me for a 2-week gig. I think I was 22, and he called me just to check in a couple weeks before we were leaving, and he was like, "Dave, I'm so glad you can do this tour, and I'm really looking forward to having you in the band." And I was like, "Is this really Sam Lay talking to me? This young kid, such a nice guy." And it was my first time playing with him. And he goes, "And I just wanted to let you know I'm adding another guitar player that I just wanted to let you know that Hubert Sumlin's going to be joining us."
Whoa.
And I dropped the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was pretty thrilling.
Yeah.
So I got to go on the road in my early 20s with Sam Lay and Hubert Sumlin.
That's unbelievable.
And then they added a third week. And this was in the middle of winter. We would drive straight through to Calgary in like January.
Yeah.
No stopping for hotels.
Sure.
Making $50 a night.
Yeah.
So we paid some dues.
Sure.
And then we added a third week in Red Deer, Alberta. And that was a trip because I don't think there was a day that it was over 0 degrees. But I got to hang with Hubert and he was, you know, as anyone will tell you, just one of the warmest, sweetest guys ever in the music business.
And an absolute innovator. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, you know, it's interesting how I've noticed that personalities are often reflected directly in people's styles,
Okay.
in people's music. And Hubert has this quirky, lovely, sometimes otherworldly personality. And that totally came through if you talk to him, and it totally came through in his guitar playing.
That's a really cool observation. Was the road, I mean, obviously playing with legends is a beautiful thing, but not a day above zero and $50 a gig is also there's a thing about, there's a romanticism about the road for people who aren't on the road. Did it matter to you? Like, was there drawbacks, or was it like, I'm with Hubert Sumlin and Sam Lay, so who cares?
Not. There weren't drawbacks then when I was that young. You know, I was just thrilled to be there.
Sure.
You know, and that lasted for quite a while. The next big gig I got, the next big gig I got was joining Sun Seal's band for almost 2 years, and then I was like 25, 26. And we were making more than $50 a night. Not much, but but we would play in New York a lot, which was a blast, and New England, and regularly in the top clubs in Chicago on weekends.
Yeah.
And that was a huge learning experience. And that's when I felt like I was starting to get good.
Okay.
You know, it took a few years for sure. But then I was starting to feel like I really could play then.
Okay. And at what point between, was it Sam gig or during the Sun Seals gig, was the day gig thing, when did that have to go away because you were too busy, or were you always able to still immerse yourself into some work when you weren't gigging?
No, I think I became a full-time musician by the time I was with Sun Seals.
Okay.
You know, that was when you could rent an apartment in Chicago for $250 a month.
Right.
In Lakeview, or I had a one-bedroom in Lincoln Park for $400 a month.
Right.
So, you know, the cost of living was a lot lower.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a few more names around that time period of the people that you've played with, because the list is pretty long and wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky to have grown up in Chicago and met so many musicians, and it's a very small community, and it's a very warm community, you know, and it's really remarkable that, you know, someone like me could befriend somebody like Lonnie Brooks or Sun Seals or Pinetop Perkins, you know, and then they would hire you to play with them. And it was, you know, so I got to play with Pinetop. I got to play with Johnny Adams a couple times. Whoa. Johnny Adams was one of the most amazing soul and R&B singers ever from New Orleans. The Songbird of the South was his nickname. That was the kind of gig where my band, back in the early days of Buddy Guy's Legends, we were one of the house bands. We played there every week, and sometimes we would get hired to back up singers who would come into town on their own. One really cool experience that also resulted in an album was working with Jack McDuff and recording with Jack McDuff.
Cool.
The great jazz blues organ player.
Yeah.
Working with B.B. Odom, Big Voice Odom.
Yeah. Who
was one of the unsung heroes of Chicago blues vocals, who recorded some great records with Earl Hooker back in the late 60s and early 70s. No, not in the early 70s, but in the 60s. Yeah, B.B. Odom, amazing singer. I did a number of records because I wasn't singing until very recently. Yeah. But I did a number of records with some really cool singers. The first singer I recorded with was Barkin' Bill Smith.
Okay.
Who had this big baritone voice, kind of like Joe Williams, the jazz singer. Yeah. And we did our first record for Delmark. And then I worked with Jesse Fortune, who was a Chicago blues singer, very much inspired by B.B. King.
So what point in time then, we're moving a little bit into a kind of cool thing, and then I want us to play a tune in a second, but you started working as an artist for Delmark in '91, right?
Yeah, my first album came out in 91. We recorded it in 90 when I was 27.
Okay, so at that point in time, what was the balance between gigging with other people and doing your own thing, and when did that become, this is now what I have to focus on?
Yeah, so I left Sun Seals just because it was pretty much a strictly rhythm guitar gig. It was pretty, I was becoming more interested in kind of more traditional, more relaxed styles of blues. I was very much into T-Bone Walker, and then I was very much into kind of the jazzier side of blues, listening to people like Kenny Burrell. Yeah. And Sun Seals was like bad. His nickname was the Bad Axe. Yeah. And it was badass, in-your-face, loud Chicago blues. Yeah. And I got to a point where I kind of wanted to move away from that, and I started hearing more of my own sound, and I wanted to start my own band. Right after that, Willie Big Eye Smith from Muddy Waters Band hired me to join kind of one of the last vestiges of what was called the Legendary Blues Band.
Okay.
And I worked with Willie and Fuzz Jones, who also played with Muddy.
Yeah.
And then I decided to start my own band and just to go for it because I wanted to cover T-Bone Walker and Magic Sam and that kind of style.
Sure.
And I wasn't able to do that as a sideman.
Right.
So that started probably in 89, 1990.
Okay.
And I hired Barkin' Bill and a few different bass players and drummers. I got to work with Bob Stroger back then, cool. Robert Covington, who was a great drummer and singer. And then I found kind of, what I'd call my own band, my own rhythm section, a bass player named Mike McCurdy and a drummer named Mark Fornick. Mm-hmm. And we backed Barkin' Bill. Okay. And did the record and toured a little bit and played together for about 3 years.
Okay. And right now it seems like one of the things that Delmark and doing your own thing has afforded you is that you have the ability to change up your ensemble. Like you've just mentioned a few singers you worked with. Now you've talked about the fact that you're singing, and maybe you can just hit on that for a little bit. And maybe we could just also talk about this record, because I guess one of the things that it seems to me like you have an ensemble for a while, and then you shift gears a little bit into something. It's all got a core to it, but you might focus a little bit this way or this way, and you bring in people accordingly. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, good point. I'm not sure how that happens or why that happens, but I think a lot of it happens with my musical radar and interests moving in different directions. Sometimes I'll want a more swinging, jazzy drummer, and sometimes I want a more stone cold blues drummer. Sometimes I want to work with keyboards. Sometimes I just want to do, guitar, bass, and drums. Right. I've done 2 all instrumental albums. Yeah. I really like playing instrumentals and writing instrumentals. Yeah. But I love backing up good singers. And I've been lucky to play with, people like Otis Clay and Tad Robinson and B.B. Odom and Barkin' Bill and so many great singers. And I never saw myself as a singer until very recently. And it actually happened. John Katke, who we both work with. Yeah. I just wanted to say I really have enjoyed your playing over the years. Oh, come on. I've seen you mostly with Peter Himmelman, who's such a great artist.
He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, and a really cool songwriter.
He's brilliant, yeah.
But I wrote a song about Donald Trump, and I was pretty upset when he got elected and kind of saw him for what he is, and I wrote a song about him as kind of a warning that this guy's a pretty scary dude, and we better be careful, and he's done some things like just the way he insults people and ridicules people and attacks people that, regardless, I don't care if he's a Democrat or a Republican, I don't care. He's just like a nasty asshole. So I wrote this song about him, and John has sung with me a lot on a lot of my records. John Katke plays keyboards and sings, and I told John I had this song, and I want to play it, and I just started, I think he came over to my apartment, and I started playing it for him because I wanted him to sing it, and he was like, man, you should sing this. Yeah. And I was kind of like, what? And then I started thinking about it, and I think he was right.
Yeah.
So I went with it.
Cool.
And then I started singing a few other tunes, and I worked with a good friend of mine, excuse me, in Evanston named Bill Brichta,
Yeah.
who is a great writer, and we wrote a number of the tunes on this record,
Okay.
including the first tune that we played, Blues from the Inside Out,
Yeah.
which I sing.
All right. Well, let me just ask you this, and then I still want to play a tune, and I want to talk about a specific bluesman, and then we're going to talk about space. But maybe you could tell us, when you started singing, you were talking about earlier writing your own instrumentals and digging that kind of thing. When you were writing tunes before, did you write stuff with lyrics, or did that come with this tune? And
Yeah.
do you feel like it's opened up what you can say using your voice?
I have mostly written instrumentals, but I did a few records for Lurie Bell,
Okay.
and I produced a couple of them, and I wrote, along with some of my band members, we wrote quite a few tunes for Lurie. I wrote the title track for Jesse Fortune's album. So I have written some lyrics. I've written far more music than lyrics.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to expand on my writing with lyrics, and just wrote a new song that's my most current release with Billy Branch that
Yes.
I think you were going to touch on. Or
Yeah, the Ballad of George Floyd,
Right.
which actually, when we were backstage, you got some good news that maybe you can share about this.
Yeah, this is another protest song that I wrote after George Floyd was killed. It was very upsetting, and I was just seeing what was going on with injustice in this country, and I wrote this song and collaborated with Billy Branch, who's one of my favorite bluesmen anywhere, and we recorded it together also on Delmark as a digital single. And I just got word that Tom Arkers picked it as part of his Best Blues of 2020 show.
Congrats.
That's actually airing tonight on WXRT. Yeah.
Well, you should be watching us, but
I think it's on later, isn't it?
okay, I think you're right, but yeah.
It used to be on at 9.
But that's high praise from Tom Marker. That's
cool.
Congrats. That's a big thing.
Thanks.
Now I want to backtrack 1 second, and then I want us to get into a little bit of what else you do. But you mentioned a name a few minutes ago, and we warmed up with a little thing, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the magic of Otis Rush, and we can play a little Otis Rush thing.
Yeah, he is at the pinnacle of blues guitar, one of the greatest ever, one of the most intense. That's one thing that that drew me to the blues, and that I think comes through in my playing, hopefully, at least on a good night, is intensity. And I think that conveys the power of the blues. I mean, the blues music, when it's done right, I mean, it can be relaxing and mellow. Like Mississippi John Hurt, I don't think is particularly intense, but it's great blues.
Yeah.
But I prefer, Son House and Robert Johnson and Otis Rush and Magic Sam and kind of the tortured soul.
Sure.
It's expressing the pain and the joy, but mostly the pain, and it's become a very important form of expression for me, and inspired. Otis Rush is one of my biggest inspirations, and one of the biggest inspirations to so many guitar players. His intensity, his vibrato, his phrasing, his tone, and his singing, which I never could ever dream about even touching, but his guitar playing mostly has been a big inspiration. I try to emulate his style and sound.
Yeah, well, I would like to say the thing I notice about him is that I feel like, and maybe I'm crazy, I've killed some brain cells within the, throughout the years, but I feel like his voice and his guitar share the same vibrato, which to me is really astounding. Like the way he shakes a string on the guitar, he does the same thing with his voice, and I don't know if I've ever heard anybody do that.
Yeah, I think BB can do it.
Oh, I believe
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I used to go see him a bunch, and one of my favorite memories of seeing him was at Blues on Belmont. When the bar closed, he didn't feel like stopping. And so Bill locked the door for whoever was there, and Otis kept playing. And the person I was with at the time fell asleep in the chair. He played so late. And we were with these other people, and they were like, shouldn't you guys go home? And I was like, no, not while he's still playing.
Yeah.
And it was, I couldn't believe, you were talking earlier, I couldn't believe the power that he conveyed. When he hit a certain zone, it was an extraterrestrial music. Like it was unreal what he could do.
Yeah.
And I was happy you brought up, when we looked at some tunes to play, you brought this one from the Right Place, Wrong Time record.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tune that that actually Earl Hooker first recorded as a tune called Blue Guitar. And you know, one of the things that I've always heard, but I'm hearing it more when I interview people like Elvin Bishop and Charlie Musselwhite and Billy Boy Arnold, guys who are around then, was that Earl Hooker was generally considered the best guitar player.
Yeah.
You know, the most respected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Otis was amazing, Magic Sam was amazing, Muddy, of course, Hubert, of course. But
Sure.
when Earl Hooker walked into the club, you know, things changed, and he was just granted a certain amount of reverence. So he recorded this as Blue Guitar, and then there was a vocal version of it. I Wonder Why, My Man Won't Come Home Tonight. I forgot the name of the singer who did it. Excuse me, blues historians, but speaking of missing brain cells. But Otis Rush turned it into an instrumental and called it I Wonder Why, based on the lyrics to that song.
Okay.
And Steve Freund always did it as part of his repertoire, and that's where I heard it the most. So can I play it?
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't think I need this in front of me.
Yeah, man. One of one of
Good to play.
it does. I was going to say though, one of the things about not playing so much is I forgot how to trade fours. I forgot what that means to count fours.
But you remembered really quick.
we got there sort of. So why don't we move for a second? You got your own band. You work with all these amazing, legendary people. At what point in time do you say, "I'd like to get involved with the club scene"? And how did that work? And
I always had a dream to be part of a club and help curate music and turn people on to music that I loved and book people that I loved and hope that other people would enjoy it and be involved in a club. And I have an old friend from college who went into real estate, my buddy Craig. And years ago, I think in the 90s, we talked about doing something together. He was buying a bunch of buildings and also a musician. And eventually he bought a building in Evanston, and we started Space.
Yeah.
And I started kind of helping our talent buyer with, turning. He was a younger talent buyer that's still with us, and he's fabulous. His name is Jake. I'm sure you know him, and he's in his 30s, and he wasn't as familiar with blues and jazz and R&B and some New Orleans music, and myself and Craig would make suggestions and sometimes reach out ourselves and book bands that we dug and that we knew our audience, who's kind of like our age, the demographic.
yeah,
So it's a super eclectic mix of music, and I'm an old, rock and roll fan, and having people like Nick Lowe and Graham Parker and Richard Thompson, and New Riders of the Purple Sage and Yorma play at Space is just thrilling.
yeah. Well, and for those who haven't been there before, which I would highly doubt there's many that haven't been there before, but I think one of the things that makes it unique, and actually I think one of the things that people thought about as the aesthetic when this place came about was that it's a listening room. Mm-hmm. And so you have an interesting thing because you're bringing people into, it's not a usual crowded bar. It's not that people aren't having fun, but it's you're not going to have to worry about somebody shouting over an acoustic guitar player, and you're not going to worry about somebody doing too many shots and wrecking the show for you. Like this is,
Although that happens once in a while.
all right, yeah,
Not too often, fortunately.
yeah. But I mean, it's what I admire about the place is that it has this listening vibe. People come to the show, but I've seen really energetic, rowdy shows that work within that same principle. Like it has a good balance to it. Was it hard to find? Did it take a while to fine tune? Because the other thing about that place, for those who haven't been there, is that it sounds impeccable.
Yeah.
It's a great, no matter where you sit in that place, it sounds beautiful. And the way the artists are treated as well, like monitor mixes and stuff, are fantastic. Like there's a attention to detail for sound in that.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about what the initial vibe of it was.
Yeah. I mean, I think the initial the vibe of it becoming a listening room kind of just happened really from day one.
Okay.
And I think it's in large part due to the way the room is set up. It's very small. It maybe is half the size of this or 2/3 the size of this, and you're very close to the audience. And we book art. We just started very soon after opening, booking artists that just commanded the attention of the audience. We don't have TVs.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of room to move around once you're inside when it's crowded.
Right.
I mean, it can be very comfortable, but it's just the sound, the lighting, the stage, the setup. It all came together pretty much from the beginning to be a listening room vibe, and it's beautiful. I compare it to playing in Europe.
Okay.
When we play in Europe, we play for audiences that are just very attentive, very respectful of the artist and the music, and they just get it. Mm-hmm. and you know that they're listening when you're playing.
Yeah.
And you know, my favorite experiences on the road was playing with Sun Seals in New York, and I was only 25 or 26, but you just knew, even at that age, that the audience got it.
Yeah.
And it was just like the hippest, not in terms of their style or the way they looked, but it just in terms of the way they got the music. You can feel that. I'm sure you feel that as a musician.
Yeah.
So at Space, you know, being in Evanston, which has always been kind of an artistic community to some degree, I think that has helped just from the people that live in Evanston that just really appreciate music. And there's a history there with a famous club there, famous coffee house called Amazing Grace. That was a club where you could see Howlin' Wolf or Pat Metheny or Pharoah Sanders or, you know, so many great folk and jazz and blues artists. And I think we kind of filled the void that was left when Amazing Grace closed.
Okay.
And, you know, Craig's a musician, I'm a musician, our former partner is, and we just kind of, you know, we know how to relate to musicians and we know how to make them feel welcome. And we have this amazing staff that gets that too. Yeah. And just wants to make the experience of coming to Space for a musician be very special and you know, make them want to come back. I mean, I've been on the road and for years, decades, and I know what it's like to be mistreated when you're at a club or at a venue by the staff or by the club owner. And it's not fun, it's not pleasant, it's not the way it should be. So we try to do it the right way.
Yeah, not at all. And the thing I would also add, we had Ray Quinn from Martyrs here last month, and one of the things we talked about, one of the things when he got his space that he really wanted to make sure was that there was a nice green room for musicians. And you guys have this great hang space for musicians, and there's a turntable, by the way, if anybody's thinking of something to put in a green room, a turntable. But you really, I think what people forget sometimes, and it's easy to see this when you're on the road a lot, is that in order to play and perform, a lot of us need a certain headspace, and it takes some time to get there. And as a musician, it's really appreciated when you walk into a room and you see that people want the best out of you, so they have nice surroundings for you. You know, Space always feeds us really well. There's always a couple beers in the fridge, and I think sometimes people don't realize how much that adds to the show.
Yeah. We're glad to do it, and we really wouldn't see doing it any other way. I mean, why would you?
Right.
You're having these amazing musicians come from all over the country, sometimes from Europe and sometimes from other continents, and you know, it's like welcoming them into your home in a way. Sure. And the green room is really special at Space. We also have a recording studio, you know, filled with like 18 of my amps. Not quite. And you know, there are guitars everywhere, and there's a B3, there are a couple pianos. Yeah. We pride ourselves on having really good house backline with 3 drum kits and
well, and I'd like to point out once one of the people that you mentioned that I played with there, Peter Himmelman, we had used the studio space to rehearse for a day or two before his show. And this is probably one of the craziest things that ever happened to me as a musician. I've been thinking about it a lot because we lost him this year. But I was showing up to a gig and most of my gear was already at Space. And I was walking in when John Prine was walking out. And he had shot a video in the room that day. Yeah. And it was a bad Chicago weather day. So there was just a hello and good God, it's cold. I'm not taking up any of his time. But that's the kind of people that get attracted to a room like that. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, speaking of people that passed, Leslie West just left us, and he did part of his documentary called The Sound and the Story at Space, I think in 2009. And what a larger-than-life character he was.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I know you're a fan of his playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, the first few Mountain records, that's just quality stuff.
Right.
You know. But why don't you, what happened Do you remember the last show before you got shut down? What has Space done
Yeah.
during these pandemic times?
Yes. I don't remember our last show, but we were able to use a nearby parking lot, just basically across the street from Space, and set up a big top tent with a small stage and a small bar with capacity of about 50 people, just to keep it safe and legal and socially distanced.
Yeah.
And we did, I believe, 3 months of outdoor tent shows in August, September, and October.
Okay.
Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Often we would do like a 5 o'clock show and a 7:30 show. And then on Saturdays and Sundays we would do like a noon show and then a 5 o'clock and then a 7:30. And, obviously mostly local people because no one was on the road, but a really eclectic mix of singer-songwriters to blues to jazz, to some rock. And that was successful and helped our audience hear live music.
Right.
We did an interesting concept called Space to Go concerts, where we mostly did it around Evanston. But say you wanted to have a musician come to your front yard or your backyard and play a set for you and 8 or 9 of your friends. And we'd send some cocktails and some swag and put on a little private concert for you. So we did quite a number of those, too.
That's cool.
We also did some streaming stuff and helped share streaming shows from other artists around the country that, performed at Space.
Right on. Is that sort of what the plan is to move forward? I mean, when we hear about the vaccine, we hear about all this stuff, all of us, while we might be a little excited, we also know there's going to be some time involved.
Yeah. We're hoping we can present music again by maybe late summer, maybe midsummer.
Yeah.
I talked to my doctor. He said, we should have a fairly normal life again by July 4th. So I hope he's right.
Me too.
I hope it's earlier than that. I'm not sure if it will be, but I think we might do outdoor shows again in the spring.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be a mild winter and an early spring, and we can play outside when it's not 38 degrees out.
I've played a few of those towards the end of this season.
Wait, my fingers don't move. I can't feel them.
Nothing moves. I remember actually seeing. I think it was the last time I saw the Stones, and Elvis Costello opened, and it was late October, and it was like 34 degrees at Soldier Field, and they came out and they were ripping, and after She Was Hot, Mick Jagger said something about, he's like, when we booked this gig, we thought it'd be a nice Indian summer, but fuck, it's so cold. It really was.
Yeah.
What can people do to help? Like, are you still going to do some special merch stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Check out our website, evanstonspace.com. We're actually starting to book some private shows in the club, say for you and, for like 10 people max, where you have the club to yourself with a musician playing a set on stage. We think it's a pretty cool concept, and we think it's going to be safe. Everyone will be distanced and masked, and it wouldn't be a long show, but it would be, have your own club for some entertainment.
Sure.
We're doing that. You can check that concept out on our website. We're selling a lot of merch. I'm trying to display one of our older T-shirts, but we're selling records. We're selling a lot of swag. We're selling our cocktails to go.
Cool.
And we've had some beer sales, some wine sales. We're trying to do anything we can, and hopefully, this stimulus bill, please, Mr. President, sign it, because it's going to help the music industry in a huge way. It's going to help that restaurant industry in a huge way. There's serious money in it. There's an organization that, of course, one of the reasons we're here is Save Our Stages,
Yes.
And to help make, that bill is in the stimulus,
Yes, it is.
and it was bipartisan. I think Klobuchar, Democrat, Cornyn, Republican, were key sponsors of this bill to help the music industry, which needs it. So clubs like this can, get back some of the revenue that we've all lost in 2020.
I think that is the part that is hardest for anyone not involved to see, is the fact that the debt is getting bigger and it's not going to go away. So even when things get better and we can have shows again, all of this time will not be forgotten as far as what people are losing and stuff like that. And that's why a bill like that would be so crucial to what's happening.
Yeah. So we hope, if the stimulus bill passes, and I think it will. He did.
Hey, thank you.
All right. That's good news.
That is good news. Well, on that note, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing next? We want to remind people that if you're donating tonight, it's going to a worthy cause.
Yes.
Please maybe remind us about that cause. Tell us what you're doing next, and let's play a few more tunes.
Yeah, the donations tonight, if you'd be so kind and generous, we are sending them to the COVID-19 Blues Musician Emergency Relief Fund, which is set up by the Blues Foundation in Memphis. And we appreciate anything you can give, and it directly helps working blues musicians all over the country. I've been doing an interesting project since the spring with an organization called Chicago Blues Network. I'm their musical director, and we have been doing quite a bit of online teaching, and we've also been doing some streaming shows.
Cool.
And we're actually going to be doing a New Year's show with a really cool lineup of artists, including Jimmy Johnson and John Katke.
Wow.
And Billy Flynn.
Yeah.
And Joanna Connor.
Nice.
And Johnny Iguana, a cool piano player, just did a record for Delmark. And that'll be happening 9 o'clock on New Year's Eve. And we have been archiving our streaming shows all on YouTube, on the Chicago Blues Network YouTube page. So there's some good stuff. It's kind of like shows like this, duos or trios.
Cool.
And there's some talking. I MC a lot of them, so I interview a lot of the artists.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. People, check it out. Also, why don't you, I think it would be important to plug your podcast, too.
Yeah. I've been doing a podcast for the past couple of years. It's called Blues from the Inside Out. And you can find the link to the podcast on my website, which is, what's my website? DaveSpector.com. And my podcast is also on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I have about 30 interviews up. We started recording them at Space in our studios. And I've done a couple on location at the Chicago Theater and a couple other venues. And lately we've been doing them as Zoom interviews. Everyone from Elvin Bishop to John Mayall to Jimmy Johnson to Charlie Musselwhite to John Schofield. A lot of really cool people I've been lucky enough to talk to and interview. And fortunately, I don't do a lot of the talking. I just ask them one question, and then they'll talk for 15 minutes. It's really cool.
That's beautiful. Let's play some music.
Yeah, we got time for how many more, man?
We can do 2 more.
All right. What do you think, Mose Allison or Muddy Waters?
Let's go Mose. That was fun to play. No disrespect to Muddy. I just don't want to screw anything up.
Yeah. All right, let's swing one. 2 F, 2, 3, 4. Sitting there yakking right in my face. You running around like you own the place. If
silence was golden, you wouldn't raise a dime. Because your mind is on vacation, your mouth is working overtime. Yeah. You quoting figures and dropping names. You telling stories and playing games. You over laughing when things ain't funny. You trying to sound like you're big money. You know, if talk was criminal, you'd lead a life of crime. Because your mind is on vacation, your mouth is working overtime. Tell me about it, Scott. You know life is short and talk is cheap. Don't be making promises that you can't keep. You don't like the song I'm singing, just grin and bear it. All I can say is if the mask fits, wear it. If you must keep talking, please try and make it rhyme. Because your mind is on vacation, your mouth is working overtime. Come on, give me some whammy. You got one too. Sweet.
Dave Spector, everybody.
All right.
We're going to do one more tune, yeah. And we want to thank him very much for taking the time to come out and speak to us a little bit. It's an honor to have him here. For me, it's been a thrill getting to talk to him a little bit and play. We want to thank everyone here at the venue. We have these wonderful volunteers that work really hard to make things like this happen. And we want to thank our wonderful staff that also makes this happen. We hope you're having a good end of year, everybody. And we're going to do this tune to play us out. Some people get that, others won't. And again, thank you very much to Dave Spector.
My pleasure, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks to everyone here at the venue, Melissa, Steve, who I hope is watching. And hope you all had a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and wishing you all a very happy, safe, and healthy New Year with the return of live music, please.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Is this close enough? Or was I closer?
I think that, yeah.
Is that cool?
I got you pretty good ears.
Chris.
Tim?
Tim. Thank you, Tim.
4 again. Well, I roll and I tumble, I cried the whole night long. Well, I roll and I tumble, I cried the whole night long. Woke up this morning, I didn't know right from wrong. Now if that river was whiskey, I was a diving duck. If that river was pure whiskey, I was a diving duck. You know, I swim down to the bottom, I might never come up. Now you damn coronavirus, please, please go away. You damn coronavirus, please get the fuck away. Go find yourself a hellhole, don't ever come back another day. Thanks to all the essential workers, doctors and nurses too. All you train and bus drivers, truck drivers too. You gotta listen to the medical experts, not these damn dumb politician fools. Now I roll and I tumble, I cried the whole night long. I roll and I tumble, I cried the whole night long. Woke up this morning, I didn't know right from wrong.
Dave Spector, have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching, and thanks, God, for having me.